groundwater table, but at the rate we're going, it's going to be sucked up and depleted pretty soon anyway. So if we don't get some surface water to us, we're not going to have to worry about contaminating any groundwater because there won't be any left. But hopefully that'll all get worked out. Hopefully God will give us some rain this coming winter, and we'll get the leaders in office to create some more dams and create the storage we need to prepare for the reoccurring droughts that we have in the Central Valley. And we'll get leadership in there that can create plans that will sensibly allow us to use the oil that's below our feet instead of having to transport it from halfway around the world, which I don't know about you, but I think if you took the transportation costs out of the fuel, we might see gas go down. I remember it being $1.95 or something when I was growing up, and I remember hearing people having it be even lower than that. So seeing as how I just filled up my truck at $4 something, I'd like to see that $1.95 again, and I think if we start using our resources that are here, we can see that again. As someone who drills into the ground hundreds of feet deep, oil wells are thousands, like 17,000 feet or deeper versus, the deepest wells they're drilling right now are 2,000. But you've got to make sure that there's no crossover, that you don't contaminate the surface water and the groundwater that we have. Most of the surface water actually comes from groundwater. I was surprised to hear about all the water districts that have so many different wells in some of these regions. So they actually pull it from the ground as much as they can. So anyways, I'm excited to get involved in that and help get fracking going safely here in the Valley. Thank you.
Well, needless to say, Johnny is pro-fracking. Like Joanna mentioned, on a federal level, what the federal government can do and what the Congress can do is make sure that the government is not in the way of states or private enterprises who want to frack or extract other oil. Here in California, the Monterey Shale, right, through all the economic activity that it can produce, can add another $30 billion to the state treasury every year. So, that can help California really turn things around. But on top of that, an energy policy is very critical. Johnny is not only pro-fracking, he's obviously pro-Keystone Pipeline, right? There hasn't been a refinery built in nearly 30 years in our country, and more refineries have to be built. We have to make sure that the federal government is not in the way, and that a lot of times entails the Endangered Species Act and the EPA. Congress needs to reform, or actually chip away at, and maybe even eliminate those departments, but at least reform them so that they're not in the way, and because they add expense to the process, and many times they just stop it altogether. There has to be reform in our court system as well, because a lot of times environmental lawsuits can drag on for 20 years or so, and it's such an expense and so time consuming that people just give up. We're dealing with that with the water issue. Right, we can't have things be tied up in court. There has to be reforms all the way around to free up our energy, to free up our economy, and that's one way to do it is through energy, fracking, the Keystone Pipeline, refineries, and then also opening up federal lands to, when I say quote unquote federal lands, to oil extraction, which a lot of the boom that's happened over the last several years hasn't been because the Obama administration has opened up lands and leases for oil exploration. It's because it's happened on private land. So that all those things have to be done together. But like Joanna mentioned, it's not just a federal issue. The state of California is sometimes its own worst enemy. The state of California has to change its policies to get that oil out of the ground. So Johnny will do all he can in Congress, and he'll work with state officials, but ultimately getting the federal government out of the way is one thing that Johnny's definitely committed to.
Jump in. According to Senator Jeff Sessions, in a letter to the Social Security Administration, he indicates that Social Security disability enrollees have increased 230% since 2000. We had 6.1 million in 2000. We now have almost 11 million in 2012. Sessions revealed a policy of SSDI payments that allow individuals to qualify for benefits more quickly. if they are incapable of communicating in English. SSDI was specifically created for those whose loss of employment was caused by injury or some other medical condition. Do you believe not being able to speak or read English meets this definition and should be an accelerated cause for benefits?
Well, to address your specific question, Johnny's against fraud and waste. When it comes to disability, not speaking the language obviously should not be a benefit. This kind of actually ties in a little bit to the immigration issue. Someone ought to be able to speak the language if they want to be a citizen of our country, right? And then therefore qualify for benefits, whether it's disability or any other benefit. So provided that person is a citizen, then they should have access to that. But they shouldn't have a special leg up on other people just because they don't speak the language. As a matter of, it should just be an even playing field. If they qualify, if they're eligible for that and a citizen of this country, they should just have this equal access to it than you or I would have. And Johnny, one of the things he ran on in 2012 was equal justice under the law. Under the law, everyone should be treated equally. Shouldn't be any cronyism. There shouldn't be any favoritism, and definitely somebody, just because they don't speak the language, shouldn't get any special rights.
Well, that's kind of concerning news. I did work for the state for the last several years, and I have a friend who works at the DMV, and she's certified to speak in English and in Spanish. And the person, when they're waiting for the Spanish line, waits for any next Spanish speaker. So other than being accelerated to have someone who's available who speaks in the language, which I don't think you'd really be accelerated, they wait in the same 500-person queue for an hour, and then they're pissed off by the time they get to us. I used to work at the DMV, so I can tell you, most of them are pretty mad when they get there. So, do I believe that someone who's come here and become a citizen, if they have a hard time understanding complex issues like Social Security and SDI benefits, that there should be information for them in their native language of Spanish? Absolutely, but I believe we've already got that there. So, even playing field, as he said, is the way to do it. There should be no expedited route because of something to do with a more comfortable language barrier. They're more comfortable with Spanish. It should just be a different set of papers that they get. I have a friend whose mom is a citizen. She came over here in her 20s, and she speaks English and understands it better than she speaks it, but she's more comfortable with Spanish. So, I get that, you should be able to be provided that information in something where you're comfortable. It would be like someone giving me a Spanish letter, which I sometimes get being Joanna Garcia. Thank God they put English on the other side so I can flip it over and know what they're telling me. So I'm pretty comfortable with saying we shouldn't eliminate someone because of the language barrier, but at the same time, they should not be expedited above that of anyone else that's waiting. They should not have quicker resources to that. If you're a citizen and you're entitled to something that you've paid into, we all have had jobs, I'm assuming, here at one point or another, and we've all paid into SDI, and I'm happy to know that it's there as a backup in case something happens to me. But it's not something where I'm going to all of a sudden say, I speak Spanish, so I can get it faster. That's not acceptable, so that would need to be looked into and reformed, definitely. There's a lot of government waste I've seen working for the state and different agencies that can be cleaned up by someone who's a small business owner and has some common sense with, okay, let's cut the costs, let's treat this like a business that wants to be for profit and as if it was going to make money. We don't need to spend as much as we can as fast as we can. If we can spend less and accomplish the same goal, let's do that. So thank you.
So I don't think that not speaking English is a disability, right? There are lots of disabilities out there, whether they're mentally related or physically related. Simply not learning the predominant language in this country does not qualify. And giving special treatment and kind of giving a special, special leeway to folks to acquire benefits based on that is really anathema to what this nation stands for. Right, equal treatment under the law, equal justice under the law. This really harkens back to what I see as kind of an overarching problem with bureaucracy in this country right now. Right? Bureaucrats have really taken over the government and prevented professionals, right, statesmen, from ensuring that government works. Right? Bureaucrats will usually take the easy way out. Right? They're dealing with lots of complex systems, and oftentimes they default to regulations to ensure that their mission gets carried out. That's what this is, right? Bureaucrats defaulting to a regulation that in this case makes no sense and ensuring that it gets carried out, right? It is not treating people equally. And it is not ensuring that people learn English so that they can move ahead in this country. You know, I think that most immigrants would probably be offended to think that not knowing English is considered a disability. Right? Folks that are coming to this country who want to raise their families and work hard and succeed, folks who are coming for the American dream, they don't consider themselves disabled. They consider themselves able-bodied people, right? Ambitious people. So to kind of default and say that they're you know, somehow disabled by not knowing our language, I think is probably patronizing to them, right? Our schools need to do a better job at teaching people whose native language is not English, English. Sanger Unified has a pretty good program right now that they've been doing with Stanford University to teach non-native English learners the English language. And it's been working pretty well, right? And it's a process. It's not a one-year fix, right? If anybody thinks back to their days taking language in high school or in college, you know that in 1 year you're not going to learn a foreign language, right? Especially you know, at the age of 15, 16. Kids in this country who do not speak English in the home, who are not native English learners, have to have a better way to learn English. Sanger Unified, along with Stanford University, has been piloting a program that's done pretty well. Other schools should be looking at it. Right? That's how you address this issue. That's how folks become successful in this country. Right? To be successful in this country, it's going to take some level of English-speaking ability. And we owe it to folks, we owe it to kids especially, students, to give them the tools to succeed with that.
I don't know if I can go down here. I feel a little short. Come back up. I don't know. Try it out this time, maybe. I don't know. Obviously, you shouldn't get an advantage by your inability to speak English. I mean, that's ridiculous. It's something that I'd have to look into, to be quite honest with you. I haven't heard of that before, but I can tell you that I represent employers, as I mentioned before, and so I represent them in front of the EEOC, the DFEH, and other governmental agencies, including unemployment. And I can tell you from my experience with those agencies that oftentimes they work against the employer, and we encourage unemployment. In fact, the recent studies show that in order to replace what you would get on unemployment or disability, you have to make $11.02. The minimum wage in California is $8 an hour. So if you're offered a job for $8 an hour, it'd be $9 in July, I suppose. Why take it? Because you can make $3 more by staying home. And so we need to just look at those policies and make sure that all of our policies and our agencies are encouraging employment. We've all touched on it, that Merced County has the highest unemployment in the valley, near 18%. You look at communities like Planada, or you go out to Mendota, which is out of the district, you're looking at unemployment in the high 40s. So we need to make sure that we encourage employment. We don't encourage unemployment through policies like this. I can tell you with the unemployment, we bend over backwards so that we make sure that we give them the unemployment even when they're not entitled to it. I oftentimes tell employers that don't fight it, because it's just not worth your time and money to fight it, because we're gonna lose. And that's just because the governmental agencies are not looking out. They're told what to do, and we need to make sure that they're told to make sure and follow the rules, which this administration hasn't done. And then once they're told to follow the rules, we need to make sure that the rules make sense so that we get our country back to work, in particular our valley. You can clap, that's all right.
You all look very young to me, so I'm assuming, although I didn't hear you say it, that you have children at home in school. And I would like you to address Common Core, but I want you to be very specific. The proponents of Common Core set forth more than 4 reasons and 4 arguments for Common Core. and there are 4 of you up there, so as you address what you understand as one of the proponents, would you please pick a different one from someone else? And then as a parent, how is it that you view Common Core having a negative effect on your own children at home? And what is it that is a concern to you? And I would like to start with Mr. Krass, because I know he comes from a family of education. His dad was an educator and an administrator, and I can't imagine that this topic hasn't come up as you have been in your quest for this new position. So I'd like to start with you.
I appreciate that. Yeah, my dad is Mike Krass. He was a superintendent, assistant superintendent of Merced Union High School District. When I was growing up, he then became the superintendent of Winton. When people ask me, they don't know where Winton is, I always say it's a suburb of Atwater. So he retired from Winton, and then he went, and now he's currently the superintendent out of Mendota, which is obviously a unique situation as well, especially with the water issue that we talk about. My brother-in-law, he's the principal at Golden Valley High School here in Merced. My 2 sisters are teachers.